President Trump's latest executive order erases environmental efforts during the Obama administration.
Some students paid a lot more money for their water and power than they should have. Find out how the city plans to pay them back.
LA protesters call on California Senator Dianne Feinstein to address their concerns. Find out their demands next. Annenberg TV News is next.
Live from USC, you're watching Annenberg TV News.
The action I'm taking today will eliminate federal overreach, restore economic freedom, and allow our companies and our workers to thrive, compete, and succeed.
President Donald Trump's latest executive order raises concerns about the future of climate change in the U.S. Good evening, I'm Brad Stryker.
And I'm Juliette Muir. The order removes the Clean Power Plan enacted during President Obama's administration and removes restrictions on the coal industry.
With today's executive action, I am taking historic steps to lift the restrictions on American energy, to reverse government intrusion, and to cancel job-killing regulation.
The administration says the executive order titled Energy Independence will focus on restoring jobs in the coal industry. The order will lift a short-term ban on new coal mining on public lands and restrictions on methane releases at oil and gas facilities. It will also eliminate fracking restrictions on public lands. Trump says he hopes his plan will bring back energy jobs. Yet many are skeptical that this order will do that.
So far, this particular administration has rolled back several environmental regulations that actually compromise the EPA's ability to regulate air and water. Fortunately, you can't have it both ways. You can't take away all the regulation and also protect the environment. There has to be some balance of those priorities.
Mayor Eric Garcetti responded to President Trump's executive order saying, quote, "Nothing can stop us from investing in electric cars and mass transit, from ending our reliance on coal, or from leading America in solar power. Los Angeles will uphold the obligation to preserve the health of our planet, protect our most vulnerable residents, and create a 21st century economy." The executive order does not address any future changes to the U.S. involvement in the 2015 Paris Agreement, which includes significant steps to reduce global pollution.
The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power sent out letters today letting customers know they could be eligible for reimbursement. A pending class action lawsuit found the department overcharged hundreds of thousands of LA residents.
Protesters gathered today outside Senator Dianne Feinstein's LA office calling for a meeting to discuss Russian collusion investigations and Neil Gorsuch's Supreme Court nomination.
U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that cities unwilling to enforce federal immigration policies may lose funding from the Department of Justice. But two law experts say they are not worried about the future of federal funding here in California.
Well, I think it's clear that the Trump administration is making the threat to withhold money from sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and I think it's clear that they're going to try to do something. What is much less clear is what legal authority the federal government has to carry out some of the threats.
I mean, I don't really think it changes the status quo. And I think that, other than letting us know how the government feels about sanctuary cities, which is clear, I don't think it has any practical effect on local governments.
Malibu and Santa Ana are two local communities that recently voted to become sanctuary cities. Let's go back to Alex Salvi at Ground Zero, where students are discussing the impact of Trump administration changes. Alex?
We apologize, we're having some slight technical difficulties, but nonetheless, I'm here right outside the Ground Zero Coffee House right here on USC's campus for the discussion being called California versus the United States, which is a discussion that is telling people what California is doing to combat climate change in a Trump era.
A man who spent 20 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit is finally free. Marco Antonio Contreras was convicted of attempted murder and robbery in 1996 in Compton. Today, his sentence was overturned.
Be patient and wait and not get too anxious for this day to come. Just stand for what is right and also have a sense of justice. Justice will prevail, and God is He's a source of justice. And I definitely seen that today.
Contreras' lawyers say his conviction was in part due to an inaccurate eyewitness identification. His vehicle was also spotted at the scene. Contreras said he loaned the car to someone else. Last week, 3 other men were charged in connection with the shooting.
A federal judge delivers another blow to the Trump administration. Good evening, I'm Juliet Muir.
And I'm Brad Stryker. U.S. District Judge William Orrick blocked the president's executive order that restricts federal funding for sanctuary cities. This order will be applied to 2 lawsuits brought by the city of San Francisco and Santa Clara County, each sued because the executive order targets communities protecting residents from deportation. Judge Orrick says the executive order could have jeopardized hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding for both sanctuary cities. Just last week, the Justice Department informed the state could lose $18 million if it doesn't comply with immigration policies. A USC immigration attorney explains how the blocked order limits what the federal government can enforce.
Someone else who was there at that time was DPS Chief John Thomas. He spent 21 years with LAPD before coming to USC. Thomas was working as a police officer during the LA riots, and he's here with us now to share some of his memories. Well, thank you for being with us here tonight. I was hoping we could start by, if you could tell me a little bit about what exactly it was like to be in law enforcement during such tumultuous times.
Specifically, the riots themselves, or civil unrest, it was surreal. I had been on the police department for probably about 7 years at that time. I grew up in South LA, so it was very surreal for me from the standpoint of one, being a former resident of South LA, to now being in a position where I was supposed to be protecting the city and upholding the laws when there was total chaos and anarchy everywhere you looked. Just an overload of your senses, because there was crime and lawlessness going on everywhere you look. So as an officer, what could you do?
Boyle Heights residents are rallying tonight after tenants in one complex received notice their rent was increasing by up to $800. I spoke with some of those residents who say they can't afford the higher rent. President Donald Trump is about to give his first congressional address. Good evening, I'm Brad Stryker.
And I'm Juliet Muir. Reporter Hannah Vega is in the Annenberg lobby at the watch party for the president's address. Hannah?
President Trump is moments away from addressing the House and the Senate to make his first appearance as president in front of Congress. He is there to convince wary Republicans and dissatisfied Democrats about his policies thus far in his administration, and hopefully outline the next 4 years under his tones of economic nationalism and America First foreign policy.
The Westside Jewish Community Center is still on high alert tonight after receiving a bomb threat over the phone yesterday afternoon. The most recent threat is part of a much larger trend. This map shows the 33 states in blue where Jewish community centers have received anonymous phone call threats. Since January, more than 100 threats have been made to more than 80 locations.
The FBI says they're investigating the shooting of 2 Indian men in Kansas as a hate crime. Witnesses say the gunman yelled, "Get out of my country," before killing one and wounding the other. A board member from the Association of Indian Students at USC expresses concerns about the attack.
Today marks the 20th anniversary of the North Hollywood Bank shootout that involved more than 300 law enforcement officers. One former LAPD officer shared his personal testimony from that day.
It came out over the radio, that first broadcast, that there was a bank robbery going on and that they needed some help. So I jumped in the car and I was over at the bank in about 3 minutes before those 2 guys exited and started firing the 1,200 plus rounds that they did fire at officers there. Training kicked in when the shot came out over the radio, and hearing the shots, I mean, it was pretty much go, just go, get in there, somebody's got to stop this.
The 44-minute shootout injured a dozen officers and 8 civilians and ended with the death of both suspects. The shooting goes down as one of the most violent days in LA history. The NFL Combine begins today, and several USC football stars are poised to show off their talent. Details coming up in sports.
Hey guys, I'm here in Venice Beach where protesters are protesting Snapchat's expansion into their neighborhood. We'll have more and speak with a resident coming up.
It's National Spay and Neuter Day. Find out why experts say it's important to sterilize your pets. Thanks for watching Annenberg TV News. From everyone at Annenberg Media, I'm Juliet Muir.
And I'm Brad Stryker. You can watch us on the web at uscannenbergmedia.com. Good night.
Good night.